Like Dr. Imami said, thank you guys for staying so late. I know it's the last of the special session, so we're almost there. My name is Max Schreyer. I'm a PhD candidate at OHSU in Portland, Oregon, although I'm working remotely from Chicago right now, which is why I'm here at the Great Lakes Bioinformatics Conference. The title of my talk is Automated Identification of Radiotherapy Courses from VA Administrative Data. And I say VA because our lab is actually split between OHSU, the Knight Cancer Institute, and my advisor, Reed Thompson, has a joint appointment at the Portland VA as well. So a lot of our work right now is shifting more towards the VA, simply because it's a huge resource of data and they really don't know what to do with it. So they're kind of recruiting people to help them analyze that data. And some background on the population that we're working on right now is it's about 20 million people and the vast majority are men. So US veterans, just based on this demographic data from 2020, you can see that the histogram really peaks between the age bracket of 70 to 74. And about 90% of VA members are male. So this is just over 17 million people currently. There are about 20 million veterans in the United States. And with a kind of aging male population, cancer is a common diagnosis. This is data from the mid to late 90s into the 2000s, just showing that the number of cancer cases overall, as well as the number of cancer cases per VA facility, were increasing. And right now we're at about 50,000 new VA diagnoses per year. Most of those are prostate, lung, and colon, again, because these are older men. But what's interesting is that this trend is mirrored in the general US population as well. So pretty much every age group above 50 in the US is projected to have increased incidence or prevalence of cancer. This is data from the NCI, and it's showing that there are pretty significant projected increases in cancer for certain age brackets. So our group studies radiotherapy, and that's primarily because radiotherapy is a critical cancer care delivered to over 60% of cancer patients. When I think of radiotherapy as a non-radiation oncologist, I think of EBRT, where you have a radiation machine that delivers a high energy radiation source to the site of a tumor. And it's still a relevant therapy because it's personalized, just because of the fact that you have to design a treatment plan for any individual's disease and cancer. You can vary things like fractionation, dosage. So as kind of cancer immunology becomes a big field, radiotherapy is still relevant. This is something that still is a concern. And the Veterans Health Administration, being basically the largest integrated health network in the United States, this could provide the largest cohort to study radiotherapy available. However, it's not that simple. Despite the prevalence of radiotherapy as a treatment, radiation courses within the VA are not clearly defined. And what I mean by that is that the structured data that is relatively recent is actually completely cut off from the rest of many patients' health record data. It doesn't pull from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which I have abbreviated as CMS here. And most patients actually don't get their care from VA facilities. So we're expecting, just anecdotally, about 60% of radiotherapy courses to be derived from outside of the VA, which isn't available at all to those clinicians. And then this data lives kind of dispersed in the form of diagnostic and billing codes, or buried within clinical documents. And these records, to make it even more complicated, span over 170 VA hospitals, 1,100 outpatient centers, and that doesn't include the 60% of the data that lives in Medicare and Medicaid servers. So this is a huge problem if you want to do things very simple, like tell when a person got radiotherapy. So our goal really was to retrospectively predict radiation course dates for VA patients. And we did this computationally by designing and implementing two algorithms. So the first was kind of like an out-of-the-box machine learning multi-classifier model. And the goal was to predict individual radiation dates. So dates like start, stop, intervening dates. And then the second model we built was a heuristic model, and it took the output of the ML multi-classifier and assembled predicted radiation courses. So just starting with the machine learning part, and I'll talk about the heuristic algorithm second. Our cohort preparation started with a pretty painstaking manual chart review. We have a few very, very hardworking research assistants in our lab that read the charts and derived a set of about 420 patients for what we call the RGS, or radiation gold standard group. And so we annotated things like, all of the courses that were delivered, the starts and stops of those courses. We luckily also saw that there was a prior VA radiation assessment cohort called ROPA. And this was a much larger group of patients. It was about 1,600 patients. And we manually chart reviewed about half of those patients just to make sure that the data was of good quality. So in total, we had about 2,000 patients. We had over 2,100 courses that we were using just to train and test our first algorithm. And then we queried VA databases and the CMS databases using a set of universal radiotherapy codes. So they also, my advisor and a few of the research assistants, determined which of the codes are relevant to radiotherapy. And then using those codes, queried the databases to get individual dates that treatment was delivered on. So we did a subset of the dates, not all of them, because that would be a gigantic data set to work with. And then we calculated features derived from the usage and prevalence, like the pattern of usage. So what not only is a code present or not, but also how frequently is a code used. So I'll go into that in a little bit more detail right now. So as I mentioned, we didn't choose every date. We chose up to 8 dates selected for each radiation course. And radiation courses, as I mentioned, can vary a lot, but within the data, we just labeled courses based on the information that we could manually verify. So a complete course was something that had a verified start and end date with an intervening period of 1 or more day. We also had incomplete courses where we could only verify a start or an end date. And then we had single day courses where there was just 1 day of radiotherapy treatment. This could be something like brachytherapy, or if it's like a follow-up treatment, things like that, but it's still classified as its own. So in total, we had 5 labels for our multi-classifier. And using these dates, some of which were selected randomly, like the interior and then the exterior dates, which were labeled not course. The start and ends and single day courses were just taken as the dates. We wanted all of those because they actually weren't as common as we thought they might be. And then we encoded features, 304 features for each selected date. So this is kind of a busy figure, but the important thing is that taking those radiotherapy codes, we had thousands and thousands of them. We had to break them down into categories. So we had procedure code categories that were grouped together into 30 categories that resulted in 270 machine learning features. As I mentioned, these were based on usage within time windows. So we had past, present, and future time windows. And we also separated out diagnostic codes into neoplasm codes versus just radiation encounter codes. And then we had 1 day, like numerical day of the week code. So in total, 304 features. This is what we used as input to the machine learning models. These were, I used scikit-learn and TensorFlow. So these are really kind of simple out of the box models. I used a 5-fold cross-validation for the parameter search. And then once I had those optimal hyperparameters, retrained on the entire training set and tested on a holdout set that was 20% of patients. Because the patients had multiple dates, we wanted to make sure that we were breaking up the training and test set based on the patient identifiers as opposed to the dates themselves. So we made sure there was no contamination between the 2 data sets. And the best performer was a random forest. It did quite well, especially for the not course and then dates that were inside of a radiation course. I should mention we did upsample the underrepresented classes. So we did I think a 3-time upsample for start and end dates and for single day radiation courses. You can see that start and end dates, which are really, really important if you're trying to nail down when somebody had a radiation course, they also performed well. I think it was a 96% accuracy. And we took a look at positive predictivity too by creating this precision recall plot. And we plotted curves for a micro average across all the different classes, as well as each of the classes themselves. And average precision is very, very high overall. The smallest or the least represented class in our training data was the single day courses. You could imagine that that's not a really common type. And so we did see a performance drop there, but still we felt confident enough that this was something that we wanted to move forward with and try and actually assemble these into complete radiotherapy courses, because that's kind of the goal, right? It would be great if you had a predicted start, but if it doesn't have an end, you can't really do anything with it. So we wanted to expand this approach to the entire VA, which is probably why I'm in this session for the big biological data. And 20 million people, a large number of those people had cancer, a lot of dates for radiation courses. We had to think of a way to scale this, because if you just do a kind of taking every possible date, we don't really have the computing power to do that, even even though we do have access to high computing clusters or high performance computing clusters. So we went back and we just said, well, why don't we just extract dates that have procedure codes based on those dates? We thought this was something that we could do easily because we actually use a SAS computing environment within the VA, and we do all of our analysis in Python in a separate VA computing environment. So it's a little bit convoluted, but SAS is quick. So we were able to do this. We thought we could do it for the VA as a whole. We went back and did it just for our test set. And then we re-encoded the features and re-tested basically on those features to see what the predictions would be. We then did this matching heuristic where we thought, okay, well, let's reverse sort the end dates, try and match up the start and end dates. And if they fall within a window, great, you have a complete course. So we did that, setting our outer limit at about 105 days. And these were our results. So for the complete courses, which is what we wanted to focus on, we wanted to make sure we were capturing as many as possible. So we really prioritized sensitivity. And you can see the sensitivity is 0.9, the F1 score is 0.84. And this is using a comparison between our test set and then the ground truth courses that we identified. So exactly matching the start and end dates, we did pretty well. But I was curious, like, are we in the ballpark? 0.84 was good, but precision not necessarily where we thought it would be. Are we in the ballpark of where radiation courses actually are? And it looks like when I instantiate like an error tolerance acceptance, so if I look on either side of a predicted start and end window and compare that to the ground truth, our results improve pretty dramatically. So when we just look at sensitivity, it goes up to 0.97. So we're capturing about, almost all of the true positive radiation courses that exist. And the FDR drops down to 0.16. So we felt good about these results, and we wanted to look and see, when we scale it up to the entire VA, what are the kind of results that you get? So we extracted 32.5 million dates with radiation procedure codes. We ran our date prediction model, and we ran our heuristic model, and these were the results that we got. So I think this is cool. I was born in the 90s. So to me, this is, radiation oncology has been around for a really long time, and radiotherapy has been around since like the 50s, maybe. So this isn't necessarily the adoption of radiation oncology or of radiotherapy, but it is the adoption of electronic health records at the VA. And so I think it's just fascinating to see like technology adoption by a huge government agency. In total, we predicted over 1.5 million courses for 1.2 million unique patients. And then I just colored the histograms. I stacked them based on the course type. So you can see the one that we really wanted was complete courses, and that's the majority of the courses that we predicted, which is great. Also, notably, we were able to match over 98% of the predicted start and end dates just based on that heuristic. And then interestingly, like we were thinking of how do we validate this? Kind of a soft way to do that is just to think, like, well, we know that the majority of the courses come from Medicare and Medicaid services. So what does that look like when we just color based on the review source? And you can see about 60% of the data comes from Medicaid, which is good. That means we're in the right direction. After 2019, we lost access to CMS. So that's why we see the drop off there. And furthermore, we were able to start picking up on trends in radiotherapy across the VA, across decades. So we saw substantive annual counts between the 2000s to 2018. We lost some of that, again, because we just lost access to Medicare and Medicaid services. But interestingly, the average lengths of radiotherapy courses start to drop after the year 2010. And as I mentioned, I'm not a radiation oncologist, but reading a couple other papers in the literature and speaking with my advisor, who is a radiation oncologist, there was a pretty concerted effort after 2010 into the 2020s to lessen the burden of radiation on certain patients, because they discovered that, especially for like breast cancer, patients were being over irradiated. And this is having really bad secondary side effects. So it was interesting to see that those kinds of trends that were not VA specific, but just kind of across the domain of radiation oncology were mirrored in our data as well. And then just did an analysis to see the density of predicted complete course lengths and saw a binomial distribution. One quick peak at about 2 weeks and then another at 50 days. This is the line is a KDE, kernel density estimation. And we saw much less common was it to have a course after 70 days. So thinking about how can we make this better, maybe the heuristic algorithm could be a 70-day window as opposed to a 105-day window, but that remains to be seen. So future directions, this was kind of, we felt like low-hanging fruit a little bit, and what would be nice would be to release our trained models, which we have available, release the billing codes because they're universal, and release the way that we constructed our features to see if this approach generalizes to non-VA radiation treatments. We expect that it would, simply because we took data from all over the country to use this. So any patterns that might be seen for differences in like radiation code usage, we think would be accounted for. And then we also want to mine additional course information. So using our predicted start and end dates as kind of reference points, can we mine data related to fractionation, dosage, and then even the site of delivery for individual patients to build a VA cohort for radiotherapy outcome analysis? It'd be cool to see, in an individual patient, if they had radiation in a certain period of time, was their combination therapy more successful than other patients that didn't? You can't do that if you don't have data about when people got radiotherapy treatments. Then also want to see if the site where radiotherapy was delivered maybe caused a secondary malignancy. And we have genetic data at the VA, so this is something that we could link to other kind of modalities of data within the VA umbrella. And then we would like to do some kind of validation, because while our results were good, we don't technically know what the truth is for the courses that we predicted. So thank you to our lab members, and I'll take any questions. I think I'm out of time, but if anyone has.
What's the average number of courses per patient?
Depends. So average number of courses is about 1 per patient, but we saw some patients with like 23 courses, which is crazy. That was in our ML cohort data. So this was like manually validated beforehand, but it's a good question.
So you had 1.5 million courses identified and 1.2 million patients approximately. So you have more than one patient or more than one course per patient.
I'm mostly interested in complete courses, so that I give the total number of courses, but most patients have about 1 complete course.
Wow.
It's the single day courses that were like a little,
So it's very common treatment.
Extremely, yeah.
Sure.
Did you look at your feature importance at all in your random course to see what was causing?
We tried to do some kind of. I came in after they decided on the features, so I didn't have too much of a say. But I did kind of like a feature importance analysis going into it. Like we did principal component analysis, and it looks like there wasn't a clear cutoff on the elbow plot for where the variance was explained. So basically, it was additive. Even
But like in random forest, there's a thing called feature importance that you can extract directly from it.
Yes.
I would be to look at it.
Yes, I didn't do an analysis of which features were most important, but I absolutely could do that here.
Okay.
Certainly a great presentation. Just wondering, is fine with uralism the features that already came out after processing? As I understand, it still may be a sensitive information.
I think they would be okay with the features, just because again they don't really contain any information that's unique to the VA or any of the patients specifically. The billing codes that this was based on, or the administrative data, is all universal. So these are coding systems that are used across the entire country. So we think it would be okay. Yeah.
So great talk. That was so cool. You talked about how the sort of like US-wide decrease in like mean length of radiation course is going to come down. And were you showing that global data, or are you showing for your predictions that they also came down?
I was showing just for our predictions that they came down.
Okay.
I didn't show the data. Yeah, I didn't show the data for a couple university hospital systems, one in Boston. I can't remember where the other one is off the top of my head, but showing that average lengths, when they changed the protocols for delivery of radiotherapy, that they started to come down as well. So that was just something that like anecdotally I saw in the literature. I heard from radiation oncologists, and that was just a trend that we discovered in our data. that was only for complete courses as well. So that didn't include like the single day courses.
And then my other question was, if only 60% of patients get radiation therapy, did it strike you as odd that you saw one radiation course per patient?
So we only, the number of patients that I showed on the screen were patients that had radiation procedure codes in their health record
Not
data.
all cancer.
Exactly. So this isn't all cancer patients. This is like the problem of scaling this up to the VA wide, where you're looking at data over the course of decades. We wanted to make sure we were starting with kind of like a heat-seeked group of patients that this would be applicable for.